What happens when you fail to invest into an offensive line? You fail to upgrade a wide receiver room and you have Adam Thielen as your best wide receiver. On top of the fact you invest into a running back that very clearly benefited from a scheme and offensive line at their previous franchise. On top of the fact you invest your number one wide receiver, your first round pick, and the following year's first round pick into a quarterback that you failed to give a good situation to, and that following pick became the number one overall pick that went to the Bears that ended up being a generational talent or just one of the best talents we've seen over the past 5 to 6 seasons. Get the 2024 Panthers. And the best way I can bucket this season and what statement can encapsulate what the expectation should be. It is honestly boom or bust for Bryce Young. You may say it's harsh, and I fully understand it. That's why I'm making this video. I think that when we look at Bryce Young, and in all honesty, I don't agree that that's how it should be, but with the context of a very impatient owner, a front office that is desperate to recover from clearly making not a bad move, but investing a lot of resources into a guy that they're having some concerns about. And then on top of the fact you have a head coach that did not draft the quarterback of your future. You fired that guy halfway into the season when clearly he wanted the second overall pick that is blossoming in Houston. And by the way, this is not to say I think Bryce Young is going to fail. We're going to go over some of the offseason moves. This is not a schedule prediction. I'm really just making a series of every NFL team. Now that the NFL draft is over and we are deep into the offseason, I fully understand we're going to have some June cuts, some trades. Things are going to happen, but I wanted to set the table, set the line of what should the expectation be this year for these teams. Relatively, we have all the moves that we're going to see outside of some late round moves. Maybe some guys get cut, some acquisitions, and that can move the needle. But realistically, I can see it say I have the expectation they're going to be a 7 out of 10, as good of a team. 10 being the best team in the league, 1 being like the Cleveland Browns that went 0-16. If I have a team that's at a 6, realistically, there's only a couple moves that I could see that make them go from a 6 to a 7, even a 6 to a potential 8. And so that's why I'm doing it right now. And if you like these styles of videos and it's your first time here, welcome. And if you know this face, welcome back. Go ahead, leave a like, leave a sub, leave something for the algorithm. And if you like this content, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and let me know what team I should do next. But right here, I got some notes of their offseason and some of my thoughts. We'll talk about the defense because honestly, that was their strong suit. If in a very bad season you wanted to highlight something, it was that defense had some moments. And you lose Brian Burns to the Giants, and I think that was a good move just because you were going to have to pay him a lot of money, and he really did not fit the timeline of everyone else at the Panthers. But the problem is you try to replace that with guys like Kayvon Chason, sorry I butchered that, and then Clowney for a 2-year, $20 million deal. He's only 31 years of age. But you're just not going to replace that type of production with a guy like Brian Burns. And the big question mark I really think with this defense, I don't know if it's going to be that great. I think it's just going to be very mid to sometimes even bad. I really do think the impact of someone like Brian Burns is going to be felt, but it's going to feel a lot better if a guy like J.C. Horn can be on the football field. It has been said in a lot of football circles and super fans and just, football sickos, they know about J.C. Horn. Like, his film is incredible. He just can't get on the field. As well as you have Dane Jackson, a second corner. And, when I talk about 7th round picks that are able to get that second contract, whether it's small or big, I think that's a good enough sign that they are going to be someone that could at least be serviceable. Not an elite high-level player. You never know realistically. But I think that's a good enough corner room to start. But it gets really dicey if J.C. Horn cannot play. They did pick up his 5th-year option. I think that's a good sign. But realistically, he's got to play, man. J.C. Horn realistically could be a top 7 corner, if not higher, if he can just play some damn football, and he could really help out this defense that is in need for some star power after a guy like Brian Burns leaves the room. But let's talk about this offense. Let's talk about the offense. It's obviously changed a lot. We have some big moves when it comes to the draft. And then you had to trade. Like I said at the very beginning of this video, when you neglect the offensive line, especially with an undersized quarterback, I get it. Bryce Young is able to move around, and he was able to throw the ball away at a very, very high rate. and he wasn't taking a ton of sacks. That's a good sign. But you need to give him more time. And not to mention, you need to build up a wide receiver room that can create space and make plays, something that was desperately missing from this wide receiver room last year. I think they missed with their second-round pick last year. I believe he was a second-round pick. Jonathan Mingo, I apologize. And not to say I'm fully out on him, but he clearly didn't show enough signs that they were willing to invest in some other guys here. Then you end up having Adam Thielen. Now, I think Thielen can be solid, but he's not going to be the answer all the time. Then you trade for Deontay Johnson, which I think is a good sign that, maybe you might get the best out of him this season, depending on how this offense works with Dave Canales, who someone we'll talk about here in a minute. And then you trade up into the first round to get Xavier Legette. Now, I understand people are making the jokes about his accent, the fact that he literally said that they were going to draft him at 33. By the way, they did not have a first-round pick because it ended up being the number 1 overall pick. Just another, hey, that happened. But they traded back into 32, got Xavier Legette. Now, coming from someone that was ranking a lot of the wide receivers and had a tough time, I had guys like A.D. Mitchell at wide receiver 4, and I believe Legette was like my wide receiver 6. I think it was 6 or 7, right there with the Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey, right in that range that they all ended up going. And Xavier Legette is getting a lot of flack for not being able to run a diverse route tree. It's a lot of hitches, straight line, or post, or crossers. And to be honest, when you have a guy that's athletically freaky, I think it's going to work just fine. I think he is a guy that, honestly, Bryce Young is going to need. When you think of Bryce Young's time at Alabama, he didn't have this crazy X receiver outside of, I believe it was Jameson Williams. So I don't want to missay and say he had no weapons, but it was definitely a decrease of the weapons that guys like Mac Jones and Tua had. And to be honest, I think having someone that is just a big playmaker like Legette that can bail out sometimes, he doesn't need to run a diverse route tree. And to be honest, one of my close friends who evaluates wide receivers, that's his job. He has told me in multiple occasions that Xavier Legette has the fluidity in the hips and the footwork to be able to run any routes. It's not to say he can't develop into a player that can run a diverse route tree. Just right now, I think he's more of a raw prospect, but I think it's a really fun addition. Plus, you get the Carolina connection. So I like the additions they've made in the wide receiver room. I also like the addition that they made into the running back room. Right now, it's Chuba Hubbard, Miles Sanders, and Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks, I don't know what his timetable is for his health because I believe it was a torn ACL that he had at Texas. That's kind of why he fell down the board, and there was a lot of debate on who was the running back 1 between Jalen Wright, Trey Benson, and him. And obviously, it sucks you're paying Miles Sanders that much. I think it's clear as day that a lot of running backs in that Eagles system with Kelsey at the time, it's going to flourish. We saw it with DeAndre Swift. We saw it with Miles Sanders, both of which got major contracts with other franchises. I don't think it's really going to be something that the Carolina Panthers are going to continuously try to invest and give him more playing time. I think them drafting Jonathan Brooks is kind of punting on the fact that, hey, we made a mistake. This was a bad contract, and they're going to try to get out of it probably as soon as possible. But at least you have some depth in that running back room, one of the most injury-prone rooms in all of football. On top of the fact you invest into Jadavian Sanders, someone that I'm not very high on. He's not going to block for you, but at least he can get some playmaking out of the tight end room with Tommy Tremble. I say all this to say 2024 is boom or bust for Bryce Young. It's make or break right now. You bring in Dave Canales, who's been kind of seen as a quarterback whisperer. If you look at his track record up to this point, you got Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, and he was integral in a lot of the moves that Russell Wilson and progressions that he made. I think a lot of people forget how good Russell Wilson was in Seattle. And this is a huge opportunity for Canales to really be able to implement his system, which I can't really quantify what his scheme is. He's even said on a lot of occasions that his wide receivers are going to learn the entire route tree. They don't really have an outside-inside. They play to the strengths of their players, which could mean a couple of things. I'm curious if they will have an identity and what are the strengths that they're going to play into with Bryce Young. And I think it might be just ability to get the ball out quickly with guys like Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, and Xavier Legette to be able to get those guys into space. And with a number 1 pick comes major expectations alone. With the resources invested, that comes with expectations. And I want to give Bryce Young the benefit of the doubt. I think he's going to be a good quarterback. I think he's going to boom and not fail this season because honestly, you only need some, I wouldn't say marginal improvement, but substantial improvement for them is just honestly not being the worst team in the league by far. And maybe a benchmark for this team to not being the worst in the league is not having that eliminated from playoff contention post by like late November. It's not to say the Panthers are going to be a good team, but they just have to improve because it's truly make or break for a guy like Bryce Young. If he doesn't show improvement with a shaky ownership, you really don't know what could happen. And we say right now the 2025 class is bad, but you never know. We didn't think Joe Burrow was going to be that guy when it came to being the number 1 overall pick, putting up the best offense ever. I get it. It's an anomaly, but you never know what could happen. And what if they're sitting at the number 1 overall pick again, and Bryce Young, with all these improvements around him or projected improvements, still underperforms at a major level? The questions are going to be asked. And with an ownership like Carolina, you really don't know what to expect. And with that being said, that's what I think of the Carolina Panthers going into the next season. We'll do a deep preview or a scheduled preview when we get closer to kickoff, but I wanted to get this journey started of, reviewing all the NFL teams and the moves they made and their drafts. I think they had a solid draft, nothing mind-blowing. I like the Leggett pick. And I think the Panthers, I really want Bryce Young to be good. I thought he was fantastic in college, but the pressure is going to be there. And with that being said, thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video, and have a fantastic day.